Hey, everybody, it's Tommy Canale, and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast, the show that tells you how they made their mark. He's the author of the book, The Last Casino, and worked in the casino industry for almost 50 years. He's a Las Vegas resident who has met and became friends with several celebrities. Please welcome back to the show, Ralph Deligatti. Ralph, welcome back to Before the Lights.
Thanks. I'm honored that you asked me to come back. I appreciate that. It's very nice of you.
You are welcome. I'm excited because the show, when we were first doing it, it's expanded since then, but I go into guests from sports, music, and entertainment, and you have some stories from some of these celebrities, and that list is 2 or 3 pages long of the celebrities you've met over your career working in the casino industry. And I want to start in the sports field. Let's kick it off and tell my listeners how you met Joe DiMaggio and give us a story on Joltin' Joe.
Well, the first time I met him, I was working at the Dunes in the 1970s. I was there for 10 years, from 70 to 79. And they used to have these celebrity golf tournaments. Julie Weintraub was a junket guy from New York that brought large groups of people from New York to the Dunes and junkets, and they'd gamble there. And every once in a while, he would have a celebrity tournament, and DiMaggio came to all of them. A lot of his people, baseball stars, would come with him, and I got to play golf with him a couple of times. I happened to be on a team, so that's where I first met him. Then I guess, let me think a second. I guess it was almost 10 years later, almost, maybe a little less than that. By then, I had moved to Atlantic City and opened Caesar's Palace. And once I got that open, I switched to Resorts International, and we gave DiMaggio his 70th birthday party. We threw a big party for him. And all of the old-time Yankees were invited. They all came, Yogi Berra and a whole bunch of the other Yankees. I forgot Ford. His name was Ford. I forgot his first name. But a bunch of the old Yankees came, and that was quite a treat for all of us to meet those guys. But one day we had a luncheon with Joe, and he started telling us stories, some of his stories. And the thing that struck me the most, he was talking about this one story where they were playing the last game at Yankee Stadium. It was the last game of the season, and he needed 2 RBIs to win the Triple Crown. The Triple Crown being the highest batting average, the most home runs, and the most RBIs, or runs batted in. If you led the league in all 3 of those things, it was the Triple Crown. Very next to impossible to do, very difficult to do all 3. But he needed 2 RBIs to win the Triple Crown. And he was playing against the Red Sox, and his brother was playing center field. Joe was the center fielder for the Yankees, and Dominic DiMaggio was a great center fielder for the Red Sox. So anyway, this is the story he told us. He gets up in the first inning with the bases loaded. Now, Yankee Stadium, most people that know anything about Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium, center field was the deepest center field in any of the baseball fields. It's where they had these monuments to Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and I forget who it was, Joe McCarthy, I think. But it was way, way back. It was near to impossible to hit a home run in straightaway center field because it was so far back. Anyway, he gets up with the bases loaded, and he hits a ball out into the monuments, and Dom, his brother Dom, runs and gets in between the monuments and makes a leaping catch and catches the ball and robs them of a base hit that would have drove in at least 2, probably 3 runs, and he would have won the
Triple Crown,
the prize he was after. So that took care of him in the first inning, and he was pretty upset about it, according to the way he talked about it. He said, my own brother did this to me. He said he could have fumbled it or not run as fast. He could have given me a break, but he didn't do it. So he got a couple of base hits, and then the last he gets up again the last inning. Same thing with the bases loaded, and he hits another one into the same place. Deep center field at Yankees. Anywhere else, these shots would have been easy home runs. But at Yankee Stadium with those monuments way out in the back, and his brother Dominic runs in between the monuments and makes another leaping catch and steals it from him. And he said, I didn't talk to him for weeks after that. He said, then finally I forgave him. But he took away that tremendous thing that he could have had. But he made these great leaping catches, and we got a big kick out of the way he told the story. And I had never heard that story before.
Your own brother robbing you of the Triple Crown.
Exactly. He was a great guy, a gentleman, class act. Another thing, he refused to sign bats. At that point, it was impossible to get a bat signed by Joe DiMaggio. He'd sign anything else, and it was his pleasure. But he wouldn't. For some reason, he didn't want to sign bats. But we bought a case of bats. I think that's 12 bats, I believe, in one case from Hillerich and Bradsby. And with a little bit of cajoling, and finally he said, okay, and he signed the bats, and I kept one of them, and I still have it. But at that time, it was a rarity, and later on, he started signing bats, and so they weren't as rare. But at that point, those were the only 12 bats that anybody knew about that he had ever signed. But now I hear there's a lot more bats around that he signed before he passed. But he was a gentleman, a great guy, and I really enjoyed meeting him, especially on the golf course. We had a lot of fun playing golf together.
Tell us about your relationship with former heavyweight champion Larry Holmes.
Well, Larry, I don't remember how I met him. I think it was when I went to work at Atlantic City. I kind of after I left Caesars, I was a vice president of casino marketing at the Playboy Hotel and Casino. This was in 1980, 81. And Playboy was the hottest thing in the world at that time. They had Playboy clubs all over every city, and it was a really popular, very big thing. And I went to work at Playboy, and I knew that Atlantic City used to be the hot spot for championship boxing, one of the hot spots in the 30s and 40s. And then Atlantic City kind of went down, and everything stopped. So I decided I'd try to bring it back. I called Bob Arum. We made a deal, and we brought championship boxing back to Playboy on CBS international television. And that's where I met Larry and Sugar Ray Leonard and Michael Spinks and a bunch of other guys. And they were all terrific. Jersey Joe Walcott, all great, friendly, very, very sociable guys. But Larry, when I moved to Florida, he was training and he lived down there, and only a few blocks from where so I used to go visit him at his training camp, and we'd sit and talk, and he was a great guy. I had a lot of fun talking with him and hanging with him. We'd have lunch together after he got through training, and he was just a good friend.
Let's move into the music category, and let's start off with Sammy Davis Jr.
Well, the first time I met him, I was in high school, and I was working part-time. This was in New York. Arthur Godfrey used to have a TV show in New York. I don't know if only the old-timers would remember Arthur Godfrey. And the musician that had the band on his show was Archie Blyer. And he made Arthur Godfrey made Archie Blyer famous because he was on a Godfrey show, which was very famous. So Archie Blyer opened up a music shop where they're selling records. And I went to work there part-time as a stock boy when I was still in high school. And one day it turned out that Sammy Davis, this was when he was just starting to become a big star. This was I guess it was around 1954, 53, 54, something like that. And I was a pretty big weightlifter and an athlete at the time. And they asked me if I would be his bodyguard, and I said, "What are you afraid of? You know, the girl." They said, "The girl." You have to keep girls from storming him, from being all over him. And I said, "Okay." And I have a picture that the press took that was in the paper of Sammy signing autographs with this whole big crowd of girls, and I'm standing next to him. You could just see the top of my head, trying to protect him from being swarmed by the girls. That's the first time I met him. And then quite a few years later, I was in Las Vegas, and I had dinner with him and Sinatra and one of the other guys. I don't remember who it was from the Rat Pack. And we talked about, I mentioned that to him, and he couldn't get over the coincidence of the fact that we got together again after all those years, and it's such a different background. Here I was a high school kid in Long Island, and now I was one of the bosses in Las Vegas. Great. And you know, funny thing, not funny, but one of the things that I didn't know about when I went to work in Las Vegas was the racial thing there. Blacks weren't allowed in the casino, and Sammy, they wanted to put in the work at the Sands, and they told him that you're not allowed to go in the casino. You have to go to North Las Vegas. This is where the black district was. You're not allowed to go in the casino. And Sammy said, "Well, it's Frank." So Frank Sinatra stepped in and he said, "If you don't allow him in the casino, I won't work. I won't work here." And that's how Sammy was, and Nat King Cole were the only two black people that were allowed in the casino. This was up until around 1963, and then they passed the law and everything changed. And I had no idea about all that when I first went there, and I had a few experiences that I was yelled at because I was ready to take care of black people, service them just like anybody else. And they jumped all over me and said, "Ignore those people. We're not allowed to do anything." But things changed for the better after 1963.
Yes, for sure. You brought up Frank Sinatra. Did you know him as well?
Well, I met him a couple of times at the Sands just to shake hands. And then after he left the Sands and he was working at Caesars, they asked me, they said, "Frank Sinatra is having a dinner at Caesars, and he wants some of the old-time Vegas guys." Now, I wasn't that much of an old-timer. I guess I was there, close to 20 years by that time. But they invited me to come to the dinner, and he just wants to hear stories from you guys, about the old timers, in particular the mob stories. So I said, "Okay, I'd love to come." So I went to the dinner, and that's what we were doing. We were all telling stories, and I thought I would tell, instead of the mob stories, I'd tell some of the funny stuff that happened, and he got a big kick out of it. Yeah, he really got a kick out of the stories I was telling. And he sent Jilly upstairs to his suite, and he came down with a little package and handed it to me. And he said, "Just put this away. It's from Frank. He just wants to show you how much he appreciates and what a big kick out he got out of your stories." And I said, "Well, thank you very much." And so when I got home, I opened it up, and it was a gold cigarette lighter, a money clip, and a gold keychain. And on each one of them in black, it said, "Thanks, Sinatra." It said "Thanks," and then underneath in big black letters it said Sinatra. And I was, thrilled to death to get something like that from him. It was really so precious to me, very precious stuff.
Did you still have it to this day?
Well, actually, I'll tell you a story about that. I got cancer about 11 years ago, bladder cancer, and my wife's boss, Larry Ruvo, who runs a big liquor company here, who takes care of all the casinos, he got this really good doctor to take care of me, and the guy saved my life, really. Because after the first operation, I had some kind of a hemorrhage, and the doctor saved me from. I was really close to having the end. And so I was so grateful to him, and he's a very wealthy man and has everything. But I understood that he loved Sinatra and was a friend of his. So I gave him the three items and wrote him a note thanking him for having somebody who kept me alive. And the only way I could thank him was this way. And I gave him that precious stuff to me because I felt so grateful for him giving me the kind of person that could keep me alive, you know, when it was touch and go there. Anyway, that's what happened to them.
I'm sure they're being held in great admiration.
He was thrilled. This is a guy who had everything, and he was practically to tears. He was so touched by it all, you know. So I feel, you know, when you give somebody something that deserves it and appreciates it so much, it's well worth the giving because you get so much out of it yourself, you know.
Agree. Tell us about Tony Bennett.
Well, my brother, my cousin, rather, my first cousin, my father's sister's oldest son was Angelo Ferrara. His nickname was Sonny. He was a great drummer, well renowned throughout New York as one of the top drummers, if not the top drummer around musicians. Great musician, and very well liked by everybody. Very popular guy. And he was Tony Bennett. They were buddies at the beginning of Tony's career and all the way up into the beginning of World War II. And then they both went into the service, landed on the beach on D-Day and went across Europe together, and then came back. And Tony and Sonny, up until, well, I guess Tony started to get sick, and Tony and Sonny's in his 90s. They were getting too old. But up until just a year or two ago, whenever Tony Bennett was in New York and had free time every Wednesday, he and Sonny would still get together for lunch. You know, they were that close that they remained friends all those years. So that's how I met him. I met him through Sonny, but I didn't really spend a lot of time with him. But I thought it was a great story that they went through Europe during the war and then remained friends and still got together every Wednesday whenever Tony wasn't out running around or doing shows out of the city.
That's great to hear that friendship with stuff like that maintains.
So I feel about Buzz Aldrin. I met him around 1980. And we still communicate. We're still friends. You know, he's 93 now, and he's not as well as he used to be. But so he doesn't get around. I haven't seen him in a while, but we're still friends. I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and we still communicate. And he's a loyal friend, even though he's such an important figure. He's always been a loyal friend to me, and I feel very honored about that.
Tell us about your relationship or a good story on Diana Ross.
Well, I didn't have that much of a relationship with her, but for some reason, it's funny. In the old days, big stars used to come to Vegas by themselves, or when they were appearing in a show, after the show ended, they would get dressed and go out by themselves and go gamble someplace alone. There was, now there's always an entourage and bodyguards, and in those days they like to be alone and just be able to do their thing. So she was appearing at Caesars, and I was working at the Dunes, which is right across the street. And I was in the blackjack pit at that time. Was before I went into the baccarat pit. And she came in one night by herself, playing blackjack. And this was the year when she was nominated for an Academy Award. And I hadn't gotten to the actual Academy Awards yet, but she had already been nominated. So my thing was, whenever I saw a celebrity, and I would recognize them right away, I'd always go up to them, give them a card, and tell them if there's anything I can do for them here at the Dunes, just give me a call, and I'd be delighted to do whatever I could. It was important particularly to the mob guys. This was a mob-run place at the time, to have celebrities around it because customers would go back home and say, well, we're at the Dunes, we saw this one, we saw that one. It was really good publicity, better than any other kind of publicity you could get. So it was our job to go up to them and try to capture them, you know. So that's what I did, and I got talking with her while the dealer was shuffling up the cards. And she said, would you have a cup of coffee with me when we get finished? I'd like somebody, you know, I'd like to talk to one of you casino guys. And so I said, sure. So I took a break and we went and had coffee and we talked a while. And she was just a sweetheart. And I told her, I said, I saw the movie. I think you're a cinch. And she was very touched. I was surprised at how much that meant to her, that I said, I think you're going to win the award. She was very touched by that. And so the next night I brought a book, it was, I guess it was like her autobiography. And I asked her to sign it, and she signed it to my two sons. At that time, I just had two boys, to Steve and Ralph. I forget what else she put. And then she said, I love your dad, Diana Ross. And I still have that book. But she was a sweetheart, very, very nice. And she came by almost every night after the show, and she would gamble. And once in a while, we'd just sit and have coffee and talk. And then I've never seen her since. That was it.
I see in your list that at the Sands, you had met Jerry Vale.
Well, the reason I met him, I guess he was out of New York. I don't know for sure. But there again was my cousin, the drummer. He was with a group out of New York, and it was Joe Barone was the leader of the group, and it was a pretty popular group in the city. So they came out with Jerry Vale to be his background music, and he was working at the lounge in the Sands, and so that's where I met him. And I loved his voice and the stuff that he sang. I thought he was great.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
He had a great voice and tone, and I really enjoyed listening to him when he sang. So I was just, at the time I was single. I had a 1-bedroom apartment, a little apartment, but I invited them the whole group to come over, and I'd make spaghetti and meatballs for them, and they did. And we had a heck of a time drinking wine and eating spaghetti and meatballs. And that was, and Jerry was terrific. He was a great guy. Just, one of the boys, regular guy, nice guy.
There's not too many people, Ralph, that can claim that they cooked spaghetti and meatballs and had wine and had Jerry Vale over at their 1-bedroom apartment.
I guess not. It was crazy. In those days, it's hard to imagine how easy it was to do things like that in those days. First of all, the celebrities, like I say, they were by themselves. I guess they kind of saw us, the casino guys, as kind of entertainers as well. They saw us as almost like their equals. One of the other things was that in those days, it seemed like a very important thing if you had the name of some pit boss in Las Vegas. Whenever somebody mentioned, I'm going to Vegas, you were like very important. If you could say, well, I got a pit boss in Vegas, so you give him a call, or I'll call him for you and tell you, and he'll take care of you. That meant a great deal because of the mob connection. Like, oh, this guy's got a big connection with these guys in Vegas. Wow, that's because, and all the celebrities, whether it was the entertainment or sports or whatever, they all, even the astronauts, they like to have a name of one of the bosses in Vegas in their black book. Easy. They like to hang around with us.
It was definitely a different time period for Vegas back in those days compared to what it is today.
Without a doubt.
It's not even close.
Without a doubt. That's what everybody says. I did that Vegas Dice King show. I don't know if you saw any of that.
I did.
But that's what everybody said on that show, is it's just so different now. There's nothing, particularly with the celebrities. They come in now and it's like they're undercover. And I remember Helen Hunt. Have you got a minute for a little story about her?
Yeah, go ahead.
they were making a movie. Kevin Spacey and Helen Hunt. They were making a movie. I forgot the name of it, in Vegas, and they happened to be staying at Mandalay Bay, which is I worked there. I had opened the place, and I saw them hanging around the blackjack pit trying to find a place to gamble. It was her and Kevin Spacey and her husband. He was another actor and a kind of a comedian. I can't remember his name, but he was a real funny guy. And there were 6 of them, and they wanted a table of their own, but they couldn't in those days. So Mandalay Bay was very busy, and they couldn't find anything. So, of course, when I saw her, I walked Diane Spacey. I did my thing. I handed them cards, and they said, we'd like to get a table sometime if we could all sit at the table. And I said, well, why don't you call me about a half hour before you're coming down there? They were staying in the hotel. And I'll make sure you have a table. I'll hold a table for you, and I'll put a security guard there so nobody would bother you. And they said, would you do that for us? And I said, sure. So from then on, whenever they were coming down for a table or they wanted to go to a restaurant, they would call me, and I would make arrangements for them to have a table or to get a nice table in the restaurant to get taken care of. And so I kind of helped them out while they were staying there making the movie. To finish the story, when she left, I was off when they left, and when I came back, there was a package for me with a card, and I opened the card, and it said it was Helen Hunt. Thank you so much for taking such good care of us. And it was a big bottle of Dom Perignon champagne that she bought for me and left me for me.
Wow.
So that was kind of nice.
That's really nice. Running into or meeting former President Bill Clinton.
I opened another casino, Green Valley Ranch. It was a casino that was off the strip, a local place, but a really beautifully built, really nice place, classy place. Anyway, I worked there. I had retired, and then they asked me to come and help them get open. So I got them open, and I worked there for about a year before the opening, a year after, and then I retired finally for the last time. But while I was working there, President Clinton came in with some of his bodyguards. I forget what they called them, Secret Service. And they were spending a few days there. So, of course, I was the senior executive host at the time and a senior credit exec. So, of course, when I heard they were there, I approached them, and I gave the same thing. I gave them my cards, and I took care of them. And the restaurants were very crowded. This was the opening, right after the opening, and the place was doing a lot of business. It was hard to get anything. So, of course, I would make special arrangements for a private area in the restaurant when they wanted to have dinner, and make sure that they were left alone. And they appreciated it so much. And they kept telling me how much, President Clinton would tell me, Ralph, you've been so kind. Thanks so much. And I said, are you kidding? It's delightful to have you here. I'm so happy to be able to help you out. And the same thing, I happened to be off when they left. And when I came a couple of days later, I got a package thanking me, with a note thanking me, and a great picture of President Clinton signed to me. Thank you, Bill Clinton, signed President William Clinton. So that was very nice of him. And it was just because I helped them out while they were there.
Sounds like you have got quite the collection from things that some of these celebrities have left you, and it shows how well you took care of them for them to go out of their way to leave you something like that. It speaks volumes for what you did.
Yeah, it was that I took care of them, but it was also they all, even the presidents, they liked having somebody in their book from Las Vegas. I'm telling you, it was really funny about how that worked. They all felt that way. I early on in the middle '60s, we talked about Elvis being, a good close friend of mine. My wife at that time, she said, so many celebrities. She had read in the newspaper about a couple who were killed in an automobile accident, and their children were able to, when they got old enough, to sell their autograph collection to pay for their college. And so my wife says to me, you know all these people, why don't you start getting autograph pictures or stuff for the kids? We had 2 kids at the time. And I said, that's a good idea. I said, but I'm not one to ask for. I don't like to ask for, I don't like to act like a fan. I'd rather do for them rather than ask them to do for me.
Right.
I said, but I'll test it with Elvis because, he's my friend and I don't feel uncomfortable because I never asked him for anything because everybody else was always asking him for stuff and I wouldn't do it. But I did ask him for that, and what happened is that when the entertainers would come and were starring in the showroom, they would bring in what they called celebrity photographs. They were black and white 8x10s, and they would autograph them all, maybe 50 or 100 of them, and leave them at the front desk for the casino people and the hotel people to give to VIPs. And they were already pre-signed and just sitting there. So I asked him, I said, Elvis, I wanted to see his reaction. Would you mind signing one of the celebrity photographs to my 2 sons, Steve and Ralph? And he said, your son, for your sons? I said, yeah. He said, wait till I get home and I'll send you. I said, no, I don't want you to go through a lot of trouble. Just if you don't mind, say. He said, no. He said, just leave it to me and I'll send you something. Okay. So a couple of days later, I got this tube in the mail, and it had these huge color posters of him. It looked like a painting of him. Beautiful stuff. I mean, big, like movie posters. One signed to my son Steve and one signed to my son Ralph. So that's how I got into collecting celebrity autographs. And the point that I'm trying to make is one day I was shopping with my wife. We liked antiques, so we were looking in an antique store. And while she was looking around, I saw these books about antiques, and I picked them up, and I was paging through the book, and I saw you could buy presidential documents. You could actually buy signed photos or letters of presidents, and I thought that nobody could own those but the government and museums and stuff like that. I didn't think that a normal citizen could own things like that. So I was really excited about that, and I got into that, and I started writing letters to President Truman because to the presidents that were already out of being president but were still alive. And the first guy I wrote to was President Truman. And one of the things we used to do in the casinos, I had dice made up for the big guys that were dice players, crap shooters, big players, customers. I had dice made up. The Las Vegas dice are like a deep burgundy color, and I had their names put onto the dice in gold. And I would hold them aside. I'd have a set made in a little plastic case. And when these big players come in, I'd slide the case across the table and say, "Here, try it. Take a look at these. Maybe you'd like to try these. They're lucky dice." And they were what we called monogram dice. Well, I couldn't give them a Cadillac and make them any happier than they were about getting monogram dice. So I decided when I would send these requests for autographs, presidents and whatever other celebrity I was going to send it to, I would enclose a set of these dice and a self-addressed stamped envelope saying, "Here's, I appreciate it if you would sign a photo and put it in the self-addressed envelope, and here's a Las Vegas gift for your trouble." And you'd think, President Truman wrote me a letter back with a beautiful color photograph signed to Ralph Deligatti by him. And he wrote the letter. He said, "Thanks so much for the Las Vegas souvenir. They will have an honored place on my desk." So I sent those to everybody, and I got into a collection. I was collecting presidents. And through these letters that I was writing to presidents, future presidents, and existing presidents, I got to meet President Nixon. I was invited to the White House. I brought my family there. We took a tour. President Ford, and then President Carter. We had a private tour with him, and he had his private limousine take my family back to the airport. We had lunch in the president's staff. They had a staff place where they had the lunch. I still have the menu from there, and we had lunch with him. So I was at the White House 3 times. Just happened because of the communication and those dice. Everybody was so thrilled. I became one of their favorite people just because I sent them a monogram dice.
Listeners, go to the show notes. I'm going to put a link to the first episode that I did with Ralph, and you can hear more about his book, The Last Casino, and more into his relationship with Elvis and Chuck Norris. But Ralph, right now, tell me about talking with or even meeting Hugh Hefner.
Well, as I said, I was vice president. I got the job as vice president of casino marketing at Playboy Hotel and Casino. I left Caesars to take that job. I met him. I went to Chicago once as part of a group pre-opening, part of the group that was going to be managing it. We went to his offices in Chicago, in the Playboy building. And I met him there briefly, and we talked. We were all talking about our plans and what we were going to do. And then later on, once we got open, I got an idea that it was my job as marketing vice president to promote different events that drew players, not just people. It wasn't about selling a lot of tickets. It was about getting in a lot of players that played, that gambled. So I was trying to think of what I could do that would attract that. So, of course, I got the fights. I brought in championship fights. That was one of the best draws to draw big money players, casino players. And then I said, you know what, Vegas, this was 1980, 81. Playboy was hot stuff then. They had Playboy clubs everywhere. It was a big, big deal. So I called him up. I said, I'd like to do a special promotion, send out invitations and invite our top players to come in and have dinners with a centerfold. They get to dance with them, and they'll sign their centerfolds for them or whatever photos they want to get signed. They'll sit at their dinner table and converse with them. What do you think of the idea? He said, I think that's a great idea. He said, but if you want the girls to come out there from Chicago, you're going to have to be responsible. You're going to have to watch them and make sure they get to bed on time and that they're safe. And I said, we got a great security staff there. He said, no. He said, if you want the girls, you're going to have to be responsible yourself. So I said, oh, yeah, well, okay. And I figured I'd talk to security and make sure that they were protected, but I didn't think it was a big deal. So we had the girls come out. We had the first event with them, and they were so well trained about being hostesses and being party girls that everybody, we got all the big players came. And they brought their wives to. They all came for it. I was surprised that we got such a huge response to it. It was a big success, and the girls were sensational. I mean, while they were in the room with the dancing and the signing order, they just knew how to be so sociable and friendly, and they were a huge hit. Now, about an hour or so after the first show, after it was over, Hugh Hefner called me and he said, "Where's so and so? I can't find her." I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Well, find her." He said, "You're supposed to know. Find where she is and have her call me." I said, "Okay." So I called security and I said, "Go find this girl." And so they called me back after a while. We can't find her. She's not in the room. We don't know where she is. We've checked all the restaurants and the bars, and she doesn't seem like she's on. So I decided to go out and find one of the other girls and ask her. And when I tried to find the other girl, I couldn't find her either. So there was none of them around. I couldn't find one of them around. And it turned out that once they got out of the party, whoever they found that was, somebody they could have some fun with, they took off. They left. They went right out of the property. They disappeared. One of them disappeared for 6 weeks. He kept calling me. Where is she? I don't know. And I found out she was in Philadelphia with some rich guy. I won't say who it was. But she stayed with him for 6 weeks before she finally went back to Chicago. They were party girls, and they loved the party even after the thing. But I had one every month while I was there because it was one of the biggest events, the most successful events. Everybody came that I invited. It was amazing. They were terrific. I mean, I must say they were wonderful as far as being like hostesses or party girls. Making the people have fun and entertaining them. They were terrific about it. Everybody enjoyed them.
Tell me about the Desert Inn and running into actress Shirley MacLaine.
Well, I was, at that time I had retired and I had my own business in Florida. I was living in Florida and I was representing 16 casinos all around the world. And I was sending players to them, and they would pay me commissions and percentages of loss. And that's, I had my two sons working with me. We had a big business going because I knew so many big players. And I sent them notice that I had casinos in Monte Carlo and Italy and all over, and Paradise Island in the Bahamas and all in Aruba. The best casinos everywhere. Of course, there's MGM in Vegas and Caesars. And so when they got these letters, they said, all we have to do is call you wherever we want to go in the world, and you set us up. That's great. So we were doing really well down there. I was representing the Desert Inn because I wanted to have one of the older casinos in Las Vegas. A lot of the players preferred the older casino rather than the big fancy ones. And so I had the Desert Inn, which everybody knew, and they had a great golf course. And Florida's loaded with golfers. And so I was working with the Desert Inn. So I think it was my 55th birthday. They decided to throw a birthday party and for me to get some of the celebrities I knew and to invite some of their big players. So I said, okay, that's fine. And they didn't tell me, but they made a roast out of it. They didn't say they were going to do that. And they put out these invitations that had a cartoon of me tied up being roasted over a fire, but really funny because I always wore tinted glasses, and it even shows me being cooked over a fire with my tinted glasses on. It was really cute. So anyway, Shirley MacLaine happened to be appearing in the showroom. She was starring in the showroom, and they asked her if she would come up to host my dinner and sing and talk to the people and just mix around with the people. And she said, I'd be happy to. And she did. She came in and she was terrific. She sang a beautiful song for my mother. And she sat at our table. Buzz Aldrin and his wife was there. And she sat down with us and talked with us for quite a while. And really, Buzz got a big kick out of her, and she got a big kick out of talking to Buzz. Everybody was always thrilled to meet Buzz. He's a pretty important guy. So that's how I met her. It's the only time I ever associated with her. I ever saw her close up. But she was a sweetheart. Everybody loved her. She was great, a hostess, and very paid attention to everybody, and talked with people and signed whatever people wanted signed. Signed a whole bunch of autographs, and I still have some of them that she signed for us. She was very sweet, very nice.
I understand you had or maybe, I don't know for how long, had a good relationship with Don Rickles.
Well, yeah. Well, when I went to work at the Sahara in 1960, he had just started working in the lounge there. That's where he became famous, in the Sahara Lounge. But this was the beginning, and his thing was insulting people. And in those days, nobody had ever done anything like that before. And the worst place to do it, and it was in Las Vegas in those days, because the majority of people in the lounge were mob-related or mob people, and you insult their wives, they climb up on the stage after them, and that happened. it was, it was crazy because they didn't know what, they weren't hip to what he was doing. Who the hell is he to sell my wife? I'll knock his block off, So he had two bodyguards, giant guys, one on each side of the stage. This is in the lounge now. So all it was there was a bunch of tables, there was a bar, and then there was a little stage behind the bar. And these guys would jump up on the bar and jump right onto the stage to get at him. So he had these security guys on each side of the bar that would run onto the stage and grab these guys before they could get to Rickles. And they were bigger characters. They were funnier than Rickles was. They were real tough nuts, but funny guys. And he had them for a long time until finally he didn't need them because everybody understood what he was doing, and they didn't take such offense. In fact, it got to the point, particularly celebrities loved to go there and being paid attention and insulted by him. That was, if you didn't get insulted, it wasn't worth going. Everybody wanted to be insulted by him. But that's how I first met him there, and I got to know him a little bit there. And then when I went from there to a different casino, I lost touch with him until Gene Cernan was an astronaut who was a very close friend of mine. I knew his whole family, his mother and his family, and we were very close friends. And I didn't know it, but he was a very close friend of Don Rickles as well. So Gene Cernan sent me an invitation to be his guest for the Apollo 17 launch, which was the last one that went to the moon. But this was the first night launch that they'd ever had. And up to that point, I had been getting invitations for all of these launches, and I just couldn't break away. I had too much responsibility, and I never took a vacation. I was too busy. So I wasn't going to any of them. But this one, being a night launch, I said, that's going to be something to see at night. It could lighten up the whole world when that thing tries to get off the gantry. I'm going to go. So, of course, we were VIP. Everything was special for us. And we were going to have a private tour of the NASA, the whole area. And who do they stick us with is Don Rickles and his wife. And I knew Don at that point. We recognized each other right away. And we did the whole thing with the tour, and then we had dinner together, and we sat together at the launch. And but doing a tour of NASA with Don Rickles was just quite an experience because he was on stage all the time. It was just hysterical. I got more kick to him than all of what NASA had to offer because I was just entertained by Don Rickles for the rest of the day. But he's a great guy, and to me, he was brilliant, a brilliant comedian. He was so quick, so sharp. Stuff. I don't know. He was just. It was just different, special. I really enjoyed the way he did his thing, his stuff, and traveling with him around NASA was really fun. Really got something I'll never forget.
I've said before, your celebrity list is quite impressive, and as I go through it, one of the names that just really stood out to me is Norman Rockwell. Tell me about him.
Well. Me being a patriot, I love this country, and my grandfather came here from Italy when he was 19 and bought a home and raised 8 children, and I'm, I don't know, we were all very much in love with America, because of him and what he taught us when we were growing up. So I always was kind of a patriot. And when I started to see in the Saturday Evening Post, the covers most of the time had Norman Rockwell paintings or pictures on them, and they were all so American. They were all so typical American stuff. Kids going to the dentist and sleds out in the snow, and just beautiful stuff that he did. Just simple American scenes. So I I became a big fan of his. And once I got into the collecting thing later on that I was telling you about, we were collecting autographs, celebrity. I went after his stuff. I was buying everything I could of his. And I found out that there was a stock in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, where he had his home, where he lived and had his studio. There was also a museum, and they were selling signed lithographs. So I took a junket. We had a Boston junket that would come out once every other week. And I flew back with them. I had empty seats on their plane, a couple empty seats, and I flew back with them and rented a car and drove out to Stockbridge. Now, in the meantime, before I went, I was writing letters to him, asked him for an autograph photos, and he was sending me all kinds. We got in a kind of a communication thing, and he invited me to stop it if I ever got to Stockbridge, to come to his home and have a cup of coffee. So I did. I went to his home, and I sat in his studio with him. He happened to have, the first time I went there, he had his little boy there, and he was doing a painting with him in it. And he told me that all of his stuff, all of the paintings that he'd done, the people in them were actual neighbors, people who lived around where he lived. He would have them come over, and he'd put them in his paintings. All of his paintings, the different people you see in them, were all actually neighbors or relatives of his that lived close by. So he happened to have this little boy that he was putting, I forgot what the painting was about. But I was thrilled because I respected him so much because of the stuff, the Americana, how beautifully he did it. And he signed a bunch of stuff for me. I wish there was some way I could show it to you, but you could see it on Dice Kings. I put a lot of it up on Dice Kings. If you watch the Vegas Dice Kings, you'll see it. But he was just a wonderful guy. Signed a whole bunch of stuff. And the museum, they were selling his stuff so cheap, autographed lithographs for $25. They had a package of 15 lithographs, each one signed by him for $100. But you're only allowed to buy one at a time. Or I would have bought 10 of them. But I bought everything I could that have his signature on it. And one of the things that happened with him during the course of this time, I came across, he did a lot of paintings for the Boy Scouts. Some of them were on the front page of the Saturday Evening Post, but sometimes they weren't. But I think every year for quite a few years, he did something else with Boy Scouts that had to do with the Boy Scouts. So anyway, I saw this package of 40 signed lithographs, Boy Scout lithographs, signed by Norman Rockwell, each one. But it was at a ridiculously low price. So I said, this is too good to be true. But I looked, I was an expert at this time about signatures. And I looked closely at the signatures, and they looked fine to me. So I said, well, I'm gonna write a letter to Norman Rockwell and send him a couple of copies of this and see what he says about the signature. So I did. And he sent the letter back saying, I believe those signatures are mine. And so that was good enough for me. But I had already, in the course of doing that, I sent another letter to Charles Hamilton, who was an expert out of New York, who had a big autograph company, but he was also considered the top expert in this country about authenticating signatures. In fact, when Howard Hughes died, they brought all of the stuff that was supposed to be signed by him to Charles Hamilton to tell which was a correct signature, which wasn't. So he was pretty well known. And I had gotten to know him very well through my presidential stuff. He took pictures of some of my presidential signatures to put in a book that he wrote about signatures. I had some really good signatures, and he had got copies of them and put them in his book. So we became friends. So I sent them the same copies to him and asked him about it. So from Rockwell, it comes, he said, yeah, those look like my signature. And Charles Hamilton says, it's a phony. Don't buy them. But at the same time, I got So I called Hamilton up. I said, I just got a letter from Rockwell saying they were singing. He said, that old man doesn't recognize his own signature. I'm telling you, don't buy those. They're phony. And I said, okay, they are suspicious because they're so cheap, but they sure look good to me. And Norman Rockwell says they're okay. So I said, all right, I'll pass. And about 3 days later, he calls me up and he sends me a copy of one of the articles in the newspaper where this guy in Florida was caught forging Norman Rockwell and Charles Lindbergh signatures on all kinds of stuff. And he was the guy that had made up these copies, these phonies. So they were so good that even they fooled Rockwell himself.
You and I both live in Vegas, so one day we got to get together. I'd love to see your collection.
Well, you're welcome. I would love to have you come. We'll have dinner or lunch, whatever, and you might as well take a week because there's a lot of stuff to see.
Well, let's end on this one because I got a feeling this is going to be a good story that's probably going to make their listeners laugh, and let's end it with on a smiley note if we can. Tell me about Red Fox.
Oh my God, he was. Well, he appeared. I was at the Aladdin, and he appeared at the Aladdin there, and in the showroom, and that's where I met him and got to know him. See, when he was a degenerate gambler, I shouldn't use the word degenerate, but he was. And I was in charge of credit. I was one of the senior credit execs there. So his salary would start on a Sunday, and he had $4,000 a week he was getting paid. Nothing was taken out for government or anything. He just got paid for it. It was up to him to pay his taxes. But he would get every Sunday he would get $4,000, and he would come to me and draw against it during the week to gamble with. And he never got past Wednesday before he got busted. Have to wait till the next Sunday to get money. But he keeps asking me Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. He didn't have any money. He said, "Ralph, can I get anything?" I said, "No, what are you asking me? You're done. You know you're done." But he'd ask me anyway, just hoping he'd fool me to get something. But so one of the days, I got a couple of stories about him. But one of the days, for those people that know anything about a dice game will get a kick out of this story. He was busted down. It was Wednesday. He didn't have anybody. He was shooting craps. I walked into the pit, and I saw he had $32 in chips in the rack, and he had some money bet, and he was shooting the dice, and the point was 6. And I know he was done. He didn't have anything left. So I said, "Brad, I'm going to do you a favor." And I grabbed the $32. And now he used to kid me. He would call me Delgado, not Delligatti. And in deep voice, he'd say, "Hey, Delgado," like that. "Don't be taking my money." I said, "No, wait a minute. Let me show you what I'm going to do." So I put the $32 on the hard 6. In other words, if you throw the dice and you get a 3 and a 3, that's the hard way to make a 6. It pays 10-1 if you bet the hard 6. So I said, "Here's 10-1. You can get $320. He said, "Well, that's a sucker bet." Well, it is. I said, "But wait, I'm not finished." And he's yelling, "That's a sucker bet. Give my money back." I said, "Wait a minute." So I took one of the dice from out of his hand, and I put it in the middle of the table, and I put it with a 3 up. And I said, "Now you shoot the other one, and you keep shooting until you either roll to another 3 and you get a hard 6 and you win your pass line bet. Plus you get $320. You'll be back in action." And it's an even money bet on a 10-1 shot, that pays 10-1. At that time it did. It paid 10-1. Now it's 9-1. But I said, "You get an even money. It's 3. There's a 3. Well, half of it's up. You can't. The only way you can lose is if you roll a 4 and then you got a 7 and you lose.
Right.
But it's 50-50. So he said, "I better not roll 4. You better start running if I do." So he picked up the dice, and sure as hell, he threw a 4 right the first. So you remember how he used to pump his fists when he was going to fight in when he was doing his TV show?
Oh yeah, Sanford and Son. Yeah.
Sanford and Son, how he'd stick his fists up when he's going to beat somebody up.
Yep.
Well, that's what he did. He said, "I'm coming to get you, Delly." And he climbed into the middle of the pit and started chasing me. And I'm running up into the 21 pit, and he's chasing me. And the whole casino is watching this charade go on. me running and him pumping his fist. Come here, Delligatti. I'm going to get you, Delligatti. And it was really funny. But he never got past Wednesday on the money he was earning there. I think that's pretty good money in those days, $4,000 a week.
Yeah,
and but he loved to gamble, and he loved Keno girls. He always played Keno too, because we had pretty girls who did the Keno running. But he was. I'll tell you another story about him. I was doing a lot of karate. Chuck Norris was my karate instructor. This was before he became a big movie star. And he had a black belt in Las Vegas, and he was teaching in a black belt's backyard. And so when I got into it, I said, "It's crazy there. This is Las Vegas. It's too hot in the backyard to be doing. I'll get the stage at the Aladdin, and we can go to school at the Aladdin." So that was a big deal for Chuck at the time. He was just a karate guy at the time, a teacher, and great, So we were doing our karate on the stage, and Red Fox knew about it. He said he knew some karate, but he didn't work out with us. But Elvis would come once in a while. But one time I was backstage. I was in his dressing room after the show, and I had a couple of the guys that were in the karate with me. And he knew that we were we were both, all three of us were karate people. So we're sitting there anyway in his dressing room talking, and these two people come in that were friends of his that he hadn't seen in a while, and he introduces his karate buddies. These are my friends who are karate, and they said to him, "Oh, do you know karate? Really? Can you break boards and stuff?" And he said, "Yeah. You want to see me break a board?" And we looked at each other and said he's going to kill himself. He doesn't know how to break. So he reaches under his dressing room table and he pulls out. It looked like a piece of wood that you would run along the base of a wall or something like that, And it wasn't the kind of thing that you punch to break boards. It looked like something you could really be in trouble trying to break. And he said, "All right, you guys hold this, embrace it, and I'm going to show these people how good I am." So anyway, he calls up and he punches, and he did the break. It didn't shatter and come in half, but it did fold up, and he broke it. And he said, "See, and oh my God, they made such a big deal." And he said, "Okay, now I got to get ready for another show. Get out of here." And he chased them out of the thing and closed the door and grabbed his hand. He said, "Oh, my hand, I broke my hand," and it was all swollen up already. He smashed two knuckles, the two biggest knuckles in his hand. He said, "I never hit a board in my life, but I fooled them dumb," and he cursed them dumb, whatever. And we were laughing hysterically, and he got mad at us, but he said, "I fooled him, didn't I?" And I said, "Yeah, you fooled him. Look at you. We had taken him to we had a hotel doctor at the time. We took him there, and the guy wrapped his hand up, and he kept saying he fooled him. In the meantime, his hand looked like a basketball. So he was one of the funniest people I've ever known. I watched his show. I used to purposely take off when he was on stage. It was pretty much the same stuff every night, and it cracked me up every night. Watched the same thing because he was so good at telling stories, funny stories. He had a way of presenting a story. It was hysterical. I thought I just would laugh and laugh. I got a big kick out of him. He was really good on stage. Everybody loved him. He was a funny guy.
Well, Ralph, thank you so much for taking time coming back on my show and telling your stories about all these celebrities. I've really enjoyed this.
I'm glad, and thanks for inviting me. And
listeners, make sure you check out my YouTube channel, The Light Tommy Canale, short inspirational videos to get you on the path to a greater you and a better life. The link is in the show notes. That's all for this episode of Before the Lights. Until next time, everybody, I salute a chin chin.